he brought me something, and it's not a Sound Craftsman. This is a Sansui AU-919. This was, I think, their flagship integrated amp. And it boasts 100 watts of channel and a frequency response of DC to 500 kilohertz. To put that in a little bit of context, the AM radio band starts out at around 540 kilohertz. So this thing goes way up there. We're going to talk about the reasons they designed an amplifier like this and also some of the pitfalls. They used a polystyrene capacitor, colloquially known as black flags, and they have a very high failure rate. And the problem is, since they use these to compensate the amplifier, when they fail, the amplifier can break in oscillation, potentially destroying the output transistors, which are no longer available and for which there are no viable substitutes. So, got the cover off, and it looks like this thing has never been worked on. So they are going to have to be replaced before we do anything else. So, with all that said, let's jump in. If we look down here, we can see that these are the capacitors I'm talking about. There's a few more down here, which you may or may not be able to see, but these have to be replaced. And I will show you a snippet of the output stage. And if you look, these capacitors marked CF are the feedback capacitors. And what happens is they feed back signal out of phase once the amplifier's input reaches a certain frequency. Capacitive reactance is inverse to frequency. That is, at higher frequencies, the capacitor appears as more of a short, and it will feed back signal to the base of the transistor out of phase and cancel out any increasing gain. So by this method, they have limited the bandwidth. When these capacitors fail and the bandwidth is no longer limited, these amplifiers can go in oscillation. I worked on one, and the gentleman that brought it to me said that it goes into protection when he puts it in phono. And that's because when he put it in phono, the amplifier was oscillating at, I believe, around 2 megahertz. That is a little beyond the pale. So we're going to have to address these. The accepted substitutes are either Silva mica or NP0C0G. The latter are very good capacitors at a fraction of the price. So that's what we're going to replace these with. You'll see they are physically tiny compared to these guys. My approach is going to be to put the connected separated switch on the back of this unit to separate, pull the output stage, go through the rebuild process on it, and then test that. I generally do the power supply and regulator board first, but in order to do the power supply, I'm going to have to pull the oval capacitors and gut them and restuff them. And I'm going to do that last because it promises to be a bit of a pain. So that's the approach I'm going to take here. These guys are what I'm referring to. These are actually dual capacitors. There's nothing like this that's available. So I've watched a video, and I will link that, to where a guy just gutted them, put new capacitor in there because they are physically smaller. I took the bottom off and I removed 3 connectors from here. I drew myself a quick graphic. I could have snapped a picture, but I just drew a quick graphic to show what the colors are on the connectors when it's in place. And I removed the 4 screws from here, and I was able to flip this up. I want to take a moment to say that there are some people who will completely disconnect this from the amplifier and put it on the bench to work on it. There are other people that will strip this thing down to the chassis and work on it. I'm not going to tell you one approach is better than the other, or even worse, that one of them is wrong. It's really what you're most comfortable with doing. I tend to make a lot of mistakes, more than I think I should. So what I do is I disconnect the minimum number of wires I have to access whatever it is I'm trying to access. My only criticism of completely stripping something like this down to the chassis and working on it that way is you have to completely reassemble it to test, and you don't know if you introduced an error, where that error may be. Whereas if you just work on one stage at a time and test in between, if you introduce a problem, and frankly, we all do from time to time, it's a lot easier to find out where that problem is if you've only worked on one unit. But anyway, I am going to flip this board up so I can access the back and start pulling out the black flags and replacing them. For those of you who may be new to my channel or haven't seen this in another video, I use a system of bags like this. I take a large bag and I write the model number down of what I'm working on. And then as I take screws out, I put them in individual bags inside there. So I have a cover bag, a bottom bag, this bag for the amp board I just did. And they all go into this large, what I refer to as my master bag. This graphic I made will go in there. And this way, as I take things apart, especially since I tend to have multiple things apart as I'm working on multiple units and waiting for parts, things don't get mixed up. I know what screws go to where. So on the left here, you see one of the famous black flag capacitors I pulled out of here. This one is a 22 picofarad. And on the right is one of the NP0C0G capacitors we're going to replace this with. And these are excellent capacitors. They are very temperature stable, very value stable. And we're going to test these both to see what they look like. Here you see one of the capacitors we're going to replace these black flags with. This is the NP0C0G. You can see the value is very good. And if you look at the dissipation factor, it's pretty low, 0.0027. That's something Conrad says to watch for. Now let's look at the black flag and see how it reads. So if we put that in here and test it, this capacitor is terrible. This is supposed to be 22 picofarads. It is less than 1 picofarad. Dissipation factor is high. This will allow this amplifier to oscillate. I don't know why it hasn't blown itself up. Maybe it takes more than just one or two of these, but I'm going to write down the location that these are in, and I'm going to write down what I got as a test value. We're going to take a look at that. I'm pretty sure I got all the black flags replaced on here. As Conrad points out on this excellent page, they can hide behind other components, and they kind of look like these transistors. That makes them doubly hard to find. I got 10 out of here. You can see these little blue guys are what I replaced them with. Let me show you a table I made in Word for testing these as I remove them. So if you look here, here's the location, the expected value, and the measured value. You can clearly see half of them have failed. Half of them are still okay. I don't know for how much longer, but half of them have failed. Steve said he checked this out. I had advised him to not even power it up until we determined if these were in there. He said both channels were working, and hopefully that's the case. But I'm going to finish replacing all the other components on this board here, all the capacitors and the trimmer pots and some of the transistors. And then we're going to test it, and hopefully everything's still good. My parts came in, so I've got all these capacitors replaced, all the electrolytics, all the black flags, got new trim pots, fresh new micas, heatsink compound, some of the Zeners were changed out. So I'm ready to put this together. I roughed these pots in by measuring the old ones when I took them out and matching the new ones. And to check the bias on these is really a pain because you got to dig down inside here on each side and tag one of the emitter resistors. So it taps right off the emitter on each side here. So that's always fun. I really like the AU-717 with the test points, but this is what it is. So I'm going to put this back together, and then I have it in separate mode, and I'm going to check the bias, offset, and then we'll throw some signal in and see how it looks. I started this thing up on the dim bulb tester, and it looked good. Got bright and then dimmed down right away, came out of protection. One of the biased. One of the channels biased with a little high, the other one was a little low. I have my test leads connected here and here. And on the other side, look down here, you can see I have them here and here. All right, so I got that connector back on. I'm going to turn this on and we'll see what our bias looks like. I took it off the dim bulb. All right, they're both a little bit high considering that it's cold right now. You did hear it come out of protection. So now let me see about dialing these down a little bit. I'm going to set them a little low because they'll creep up as the amplifier warms up. And really should have turned it the other way, but let's see here. Okay, so these are supposed to be set for 20 millivolts. I'm going to try to get around 17, 18. Like I said, as it warms up, it's going to change. But I will leave this on for a few minutes, turn the camera off, of course, and then I'll come back, we'll check the offset, then we'll put some signal in, see what this thing looks like. Okay, these are supposed to be within 1 millivolt, and they are there. So now I'm going to turn this off so I can pull these test leads off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some speaker leads on. We're going to check the offset. I got the 2 meters connected to the speaker connectors. So when I turn this on, it comes out of protection. We can set the offset. Okay, it's out of protection. Oof, offset's off a little bit. See what we get here. Okay, we're getting the 1 down there. Some people put in multi-turn pots, and I kind of get it, you know. But you can get this, you just have to be patient. I'm not patient, though. This one's way out. Okay, that's down in the microvolt range, so that's good enough. All right, so now the moment of truth, we're going to pump some signal through here and see what we can get. Okay, so this is take 2 because I forgot that I need to run a dedicated power line to this amplifier. I get by with smaller amps on my bench here. I had an electrician come in and replace my service when a Tesla charger was installed in the garage here. I really should have just shelled out the extra money to have 2 20 amp dedicated lines run to the bench, but I cheaped out, and now I'm sorry I did. So now I have to run a heavy duty extension cord across the garage whenever I test larger amps. Well, anyhow, having said all that, I was getting some clipping near full power, and that's why. So if we turn this on here, we get about 93 volts. Distortion's pretty low. And if I crank it up a little bit, okay, we're getting 100 watts on one channel, about 98 on the other. And the distortion is pretty good. Now I'm tapped off of the low, which is going to give you a little slightly higher distortion. But we're making power. Everything looks good. If I turn it off, we don't see any oscillation. So the output stage, I'm now confident is good. Got to go through all the rest of the amp now. In order to accurately measure our distortion from this amplifier, we have to measure it right at the output of the amp. And I have these cables that go directly to the analyzer from the output. The other ones go to the dummy load, these here. I don't normally do this because I'm usually more interested in the power the amp's putting out. And this is a little bit of a messier connection process. However, this is the only way you will get accurate measurements of distortion. So let's feed some signal into this and see what we can get out of here. All right, let's check our distortion to see what we can get out of here. There you go. We have 97 and 95 watts at 0.009 and 0.008%. We can get it right up to 100 watts. Okay. It's a little out of spec, but you have to remember, I've owned this thing close to 15 years, and it's never been calibrated since I've owned it. And it was probably not calibrated for decades before that. So I think this is okay. So just for grins, I wanted to see what would happen if I swept this amplifier from 10 hertz to 500 kilohertz. And it looks pretty flat. Before I conclude part one of this video, I wanted to speak briefly about the reason Sansui created such a high frequency response amplifier. I have spoken about this in the past. I've done some reading from Bob Cordell and others that explain the reasoning behind this. And as I mentioned, the reasoning was because a lot of people buy amplifiers based on specs, and transient intermodulation distortion became a kind of a buzzword back when this amp came out. And what Sansui and probably other manufacturers had done was create very fast amplifiers. Now, what this means is these amplifiers have a very high frequency response, and they respond more quickly to changes in their input. And that's the crux of the matter here. The point is, when you have a very fast or high frequency transient event at the input of an audio amplifier like this, it takes a certain amount of time to propagate all the way through the amplifier and then go back to the input to cancel out the distortions. Negative feedback is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a very good thing, and it helped bring amplifier distortions down drastically. However, a very fast event may be faster than the feedback path, and at that point, you will have no negative feedback. They call this open loop gain, and it can drive the amplifier into distortion. This is a very short event. I cannot speak as to whether or not this is audible. That's subjective, and I really don't want to weigh in there. But that was the reasoning that they created an amplifier like this. Now let's take a look at the specs for this amp. I apologize for the quality of this image. This is from the service manual I had downloaded. I want to call your attention to two specs you don't often see in audio amplifiers, and that is rise time and slew rate. This indicates the speed of the amplifier. Slew rate is given in volts per microsecond. And basically it says it'll rise 200 volts per microsecond at the input or through the amplifier. Now it's never going to see 200 volts, but this indicates a very high speed amplifier. Rise time is the time it takes a square wave to go from 10% to 90% of its leading edge. Again, 0.5 microsecond. This is a very fast amp, and that was the whole reasoning behind it. Whether or not this is audible, I can't say, but that is why this amplifier has a frequency response from 10 hertz, well, no, I'm sorry, DC to 500 kilohertz. Anyway, I just wanted to speak briefly about that. I don't like these videos to drag on too long. This is part one of a series as I go through this entire amplifier. Anyhow, as always, I thank everyone for watching, and I like giving back to the community that's given me so much. Thanks a lot, folks.